Right. Okay. 165. We will start from the end of the third line. We went a little bit further, but not sufficiently clearly and deeply enough. At the end of the third line. And we are in the midst of explaining the power and the function of Moya Hadas. There is Chochma, Bina, Vadas. Chochma and Bina are the two faculties of understanding, conceptualizing, and then bringing it down to understanding. What is Das? So the Rebbe explained that Das is where everything really happens, where everything comes together and becomes a reality, and this is where the decision is made. And now we're talking in terms of Avodas Ruchnis, Avodas Hashem. That Avodas Hashem, there is this process. And we're in the middle of this process. So we started that when one, for instance, would reflect in his seichel, which is in Chochma and Bina, he would reflect on the union of the creation of that the world came b'derech bri yesh me'ayin, came as a creation yesh me'ayin. And we discussed last time quite at length to explain what is the significance of yesh me'ayin. Shall I repeat it, or can I solicit some help here?
I wouldn't mind hearing it again from you.
Well, in view of the fact that there were two people that weren't there, the union of yesh me'ayin is that here is something that gets created, which means it does not exist at all and gets created. And yet, it is created with such totality, with such clarity, like as if it came from nowhere. It becomes a completely independent entity. And you don't see its weaknesses. You don't see the fact that really if it were not to be supported, it just evaporates into nothingness. Okay, and now we learn inside at the end of this third line. Hine. So then, Gam kshemasik esoinyan betoiv. Even after one understands the sinyan very well, shehoilam. What does he understand? That the world nizhave came into being mikoyach eliki. From a godly force that created it. He understands that this type of presence, a presence that is so total, can only come from a godly source. It cannot come from another, what's called a limited source. Only a godly source that is unlimited can create such an entity. So you recognize that this is a godly source. V'yavin as inyan heitev, and he will further understand this inyan very well. Bekamo has bade him v'rayes v'heichoches, utilizing all kinds of different explanations and proofs and supporting arguments. He will explain everything properly. And everything is going to be based on logical arguments. Okmei shekosuv, and as the posuk says, ve'ato mechaye eskulam, The ato, you referring to Hashem, Machaya, Skulom, give sustenance and life to all of them. Everything that exists is actually supported completely and enlivened by a koyach eliki, by a godly force. Shemahava umachaya. Mahava means it brings into existence, lashon heva, to be present. Umachaya, and gives it life, gives it chayas, gives it vitality. And then furthermore, he will understand the ultimate principle. Umeyamitas himotzoi nimtzu kol hanimtzoi. This is a direct quote from the Rambam, when the Rambam describes the inyan of Amunas Hashem. And a person, he says, he says, if a person is misboining, he reflects and understands clearly that me'amitas himotzei, from the truth. These words I want to discuss a little bit, but let me first translate them. Me'amitas himotzei, from the truth of his presence, nimtzu kol hanimtzoim, came forth and became present all other presences. Okay, what this is saying is quite a direct statement. It says like this. What is the concept that anything exists? What is existence? The answer is that there is a true existence, a true presence. Amitism, a true presence. This true presence is not a finite presence that you can ask, what does it mean that it exists? It's an unlimited presence that as the expression is, cannot not exist. It's not something that exists by virtue of something happening. It's a truth itself. We have absolutely no way of understanding, of so to speak, of grasping what that means. But this is the thing that was revealed to us, and we know that there is a true presence. This is what the Rambam says, Motzei Rishon, of true presence. This true presence means it is truly present, meaning it is not a presence that depends on something else to be. He is there because of his own self. And this provides presence and existence for everything else. Because that there is a true presence, this is why there are relative presence. You know what relative presence means? Limited presence. Something that could be, it could not be. So, and one reflects and understands all of this. So when one reflects on this and understands all of this should, by right, you can imagine what that should do to the person. It should elevate the person and say, wow, there is truth in this existence. It's not just an accidental thing. It's not just a limited relative thing. There is truth, there is purpose, there is meaning. And yet, as we're going to see, he can understand all of this and bring and have all kinds of supporting arguments and supporting reasoning, and yet it doesn't affect him. And this is what he says. So mikol mokoy. And yet still, after that, he understands all of this. Still, for some reason, ein nitfas. It does not get nitfas. It does not get grasped. In other words, it doesn't really affect the nidbak b'moichoi. And it does not, nidbak means it does not connect to his brain. He knows it, and he knows it's right, but it doesn't become part of his thinking. B'hanocha toiva. In b'hanocha toiva, as we already explained what it means, with the proper ease, proper set in a calm way, where he actually sees, yes, this is it, this is reality itself. V'shoyoyir ha'inyan b'moichoi, so that this inyan should shine in his brain. B'chayus v'simchas hanefesh b'ho'inyan. B'chayus, with vitality and excitement. V'simchas hanefesh, and joy. This type of reflection should really bring exuberance to the soul. Like this, we walk around in the world, and everything is just either there or not there. There's no meaning to existence. We try to tell ourselves, "Oh, this is exciting. This is exciting. No, this tastes good. No, this tastes good." This is all meaningless. It's all fooling oneself. When he reflects on this changes his whole perspective on life, changes his perspective on the world, on himself, and he sees there is true reality, and this should bring chayus, excitement to live. It's meaningful, it's real, and simchas hanefesh, it should bring joy, because there's a real world, and it's a created world, a purposeful, meaningful world, and yet it doesn't happen. After all that, he understands it. Because Chochmah and Bina will not have that effect. No matter how well he understands it. How clearly and unrefutably, that was without question. Ki'im alidei hadas. When das has happened, when he brings it down to das. What is das? How do you get into das? Shahu, which is Hahiskashrus, the connection or tying, like kesher. Kesher means a knot, that he attaches himself. Shemekasher atzmoi, he attaches himself. V'nichnas bipnimius v'oimegoinyan. He enters into the inside and the depth of the inyan. There are two complete distinct levels of thinking, of reflection. One is, how is the thing? How does it work? Is it correct or incorrect? And the other is, what is it? What is it? Not how and what are the proofs. Okay, now do I know that this is the truth? Okay, let me reflect on this truth itself. What does it mean? As long as he's debating, is it right or wrong, he cannot really attach himself to the inyan, because he's not sure it's correct. But once that he's got it clear, and he fully understands what it is, then this opens him up that he now wants to get to know it personally. Not just to know it logically, but personally. This is my life. This is the reality. So now he begins to think into the reality itself. That's das. This is the big, profound difference between Chochmah and Bina and das. Chochmah and Bina, one could say, although it's it's not 100% true in today's world, in academic, one could say that, relatively speaking, even in Torah, this is like the academics of Torah. Everybody knows what academics means. You learn something to know. Not chas v'sholom to say, I'm learning just to know, but I'm not interested in it. We don't mean that kind of academics. But relative to that, this is like academics. First you have to know what is the halacha, what is the truth, what is the fact. And then there is this further, much more profound step, where one says, deep. Now one says, I know it all. It's not a question of getting to know and be able to answer a question. Even to myself. Everything is clear. I know exactly what's right. So I have no doubt about it. But now I want to actually live with it. So that tomorrow I don't have to ask myself again the question, what's the world about? This is something which I am already experiencing personally. This is my life. This means das. And that's a step, a profound step, a deep step all by itself. And in a certain sense, it is deeper and more difficult than the previous ones. And as we explained previous time, that I'd like you to understand this. I hope I don't confuse you. That the reason this is possible, after all, one understood and had proofs and explanations that the world is a creation yesh me'ayin. In other words, he doesn't know it on his own. He has to learn about it and find out about it. And this is how it was explained to him. It's yesh me'ayin. So, how does it ever become his own knowledge? It's knowledge that he had acquired. He learned it from somebody. How does it become das? So the process of das is the hiskashus that he attaches himself, goes into this. But the real reason that this is possible, that it should become his view and his own knowledge, is that really in truth, his nefesh, he knows it all the time. This is the way he really thinks, except he wasn't consciously aware of it. But really, this is the reality of his nefesh. This is, like we said right there, he brings simchas nefesh, brings joy to his nefesh. Why does he bring joy to his nefesh? Because this is what the nefesh lives with.
Not to jump forward, but this is where the idea of, not to jump too far forward, but this is where the idea of hakara comes in. That the
Of the what?
Hakara standing, right?
Hakara.
The neshama is not something new for the neshama. Neshama already knows. It's just recognizing what it is that it already knew.
Right.
It's being put into the intellect.
Right. The illustration for this I'll take you down to a much less exciting level, but we have to understand it. I illustrate this with what we have experienced in what's called seichel anushi, in human common sense things. On the simplest level, common sense tells a person that he should eat, like we always say, eat with a spoon and a fork, and not put his face into the plate. He had to learn it. As a child, he didn't figure this out. He was taught, this is how you're supposed to eat. But after a while, he realizes that he doesn't really have to be told and taught. This is perfectly right. This is the right way to eat. He can't think of any other way to eat. It would not be appropriate. It would not be human. It would be contrary to his nature, contrary to his self-respect to eat otherwise. So even though that it comes to him sort of through a process, like an acquired knowledge, but this knowledge is not a strange knowledge. It's not a foreign knowledge. It is a primary knowledge. Except in the human being, everything has to go to the process of learning. And I'll explain that also, but this is the point. Everything in the human being has to go through a process of learning. He is born knowing nothing. Not that he knows everything, but on a much deeper, higher level. And then slowly it has to be revealed through the process of learning. And therefore he has to learn even the simplest things. He has to learn how to walk. He has to learn how to eat. He has to learn how to keep clean. All of these things he had to learn. But these are not strange things. These are perfectly human things. And a person who does not live like that, we say, oh, he's not living up to being who he is. It's not that he didn't learn. He's not living the way he himself wants to really inherently to live. So this is true, whether it's called on common sense level, on human level, and by nefesh olekis on a deeper level. This is true in these areas that we're talking about. In terms, a human being does not only want to know how he should live, how to keep himself healthy and clean. He wants to know what is life about. What is it for? What is the meaning? He is a godly soul. He recognizes there is something bigger than just the immediate experience. There is something bigger, and he is looking for something bigger, because that's what his soul is. His soul is looking for, what's there for the soul, not for the body. And therefore, he can really relate to this truth directly, except he has to go through the process of learning. He can't come to it directly. This is the human being.
Why is it then, I know this is been kind of exactly what we're learning, but like, if you're going to take a person and you're going to show him a person that he already knew, and he's going to recognize the person, even if he hasn't seen him in so long, he's going to say, where do I know you from? You seem familiar, but immediately when you show it to him, he's going to recognize it. It's going to click in his mind, this is familiar to me. So why is it that you can take a concept like that, the world is created yesh ma'ayin, that everything comes from Hashem, and you can, so to speak, a person that's never heard this before, a yid that grew up in the absence of Judaism, you can introduce him to this concept. How come that he doesn't? I mean, I guess in some cases he does. Why people have a move towards tshuva when they find out about Yiddishkeit. But why is it that some people, they don't have this? It doesn't go off in them. You can tell them everything that you know about Yiddishkeit and about Hashem and everything, and there's no recognition there. And Hashem already knows it, and you just introduce this concept into the person's intellect. But there's no recognition. There's no remembrance. There's like the neshama doesn't. You understand what I'm saying? How can it be?
Well, there are 2 points to this. One is that immediately when a person recognizes that this which you are telling him means that he has to change around his life, or that his past life was all in error, he rejects it. There is a conscious rejection. I don't want to know. Or it's too scary. This experience of I don't want to know, it's too scary, is even true of someone who did accept Yiddishkeit. He accepts, he goes through, like we spoke yesterday, he goes through in a certain change, and he grows and grows and grows until he comes to a point where he says, oh no, this, you mean, this is what I have. These are the ills that I'm going through. He can't face it, and then there is a rejectionist attitude, and it's another challenge to get over it and say yes, you have to go further. That's number one, and number two, because as we explained, in a human being, everything has to go through the process of learning. One's mind can be, chas v'sholem, one's so contaminated that he fails to recognize what you're talking about. He doesn't understand what you're saying. It's words without content. There is such a thing too. If one has been reared in the principle that the world view, the scientific view, the Gashmistic view, especially in the way it's presented today, that it's all world creates world, and rejecting intentionally any other concept, his mind is effectively dead to the neshama. He has got no soul. He's like a computer, as smart as he is. And he has to go. It's like a real operation, a real transformation to get back to life. I had a call one time from a woman from the memory of Toronto. Somebody told her to call me, and she wanted to come down, and she decided it's too expensive and all that. So we spoke on the phone, and this woman, well, a former woman, a religious woman, and then she somehow, for some reason, started going to college, and she learned all kinds of ideas very quickly, and she got all confused. And as we were talking, I showed her, I said, that you have lost sight that there's a difference between a human brain and a computer. And she says, yeah, I don't see any difference. It took me some talking to her, showing her, it's a completely different world. And then she came back to herself, she calmed down. She was very happy with this conversation. Come back to life. The point is, what you're saying, can happen, but a mind can be contaminated. Like the Alter Rebbe says, tumas moichin, contaminated, tomei. No, it can't touch anything holy, anything you raise. Okay, so now let's go inside here and see how you describe the das, the process of das. The process of das is that after that he understands this whole thing, he now recognizes that this is true. And then he says, okay, if it's true, let me get into it and reflect what this truth represents. What does it mean? It's no longer the question, what's true? It is, what is it? Let me get to know it. This means, Bekasher, Atzmo, he attaches himself, he enters internally to the Inyan. As long as he's still trying to understand, how is it, he's not inside. He doesn't go inside, he's just trying to understand how the thing is. Once he is convinced and he sees the reasoning of this is how it is, then he wants to say, okay, so what does it really mean? What type of world am I looking at in contrast to the world I saw yesterday? Yesterday I saw a world that's completely devoid. You know what devoid means? It doesn't have any godliness behind it. Now I see a completely different world. What does it mean? What kind of world is this? What am I looking at? This means he goes into the Etzem Inyan. Ad shebo, until that he reaches, he comes, l'dei hargosh as haseichel. He comes to the point where he actually senses, he feels this seichel, which means that it's no longer something which is based on reason, on logic, on proof, but he feels the truth of the Inyan itself. He no longer needs supporting evidence. He feels it. This is right. This is the truth. Shenir gash etzlei ho'inyan. The Inyan becomes felt by him. So then, harei hu bo bipnimius moichoi, then the seichel enters b'pnimius moicha, inside his brain, v'hanocha uklito toiva. V'hanocha means it settles. It settles in his mind. Settling means he no longer has questions. He's no longer trying to hold on to something. It settles in peacefully, calmly. Or klita toiva, and it's absorbed very well. He relates to it. He can relate to it. It's not something that he has any kind of rejection, any kind of adversity with. And then umeir etzlo hoinyan. Then the inyan begins to shine. Then the real brightness and beauty of the inyan comes forth. Because now he actually came inside. And thus he acquires a chayus godil bozeh, a great vitality, great excitement, great chayus. He is excited by having found this. Because it relates to him, he can relate to it. V'nidbag ba'oid beho'inyan. V'nidbag ma'oid beho'inyan. And he becomes attached, ma'oid, very much in this inyan. He becomes very strongly attached to this inyan. Being attached to this inyan means he doesn't want to let go. He doesn't want to go elsewhere. So this is das. And thus, in this brief discussion over here and what we have kind of illuminated and added to it, we understand how das is a reflection of the nefesh itself. Seichel, chochmah, bina are like koiches and nefesh, are means of that reflection.
In a mirror, you see reflection.
It comes a direct connect to the nefesh itself. Chochmah and bina are like koiches and nefesh. Okay, like if you want to eat something, you pick it up with your hand. When you pick it up with your hand, you already know that this is good food, but you haven't yet tasted it. Personally, you don't have a personal connection to it. The hand is only a means of taking it. But when you put it in your mouth, then you have a personal connect to it. Das is where there is a personal recognition of being, a personal connect, not just a means of knowing something. Chochmah and Bina are also koiches hanefesh. The reason one understands the whole concept, even in Chochmah and Bina, it's also because he has a nefesh. But it's not at the same level as Das. Das is a direct reflection of the nefesh. The way the spheres are organized in Kabbalah, it's just the form of it reflects the inyan. It is that there is the rotzin, and the nefesh itself, the rotzin, the will, and oineg nefesh, which is the highest koiches, all-encompassing, which is the nefesh itself. Then there is chochmah and bina, right and left, chochmah and bina. And das is in the middle, facing directly to the nefesh. That's how it is described in Kabbalah. The reason that das is in the middle line is because it actually, even though it comes after chochmah and bina, it's revealed after chochmah and bina. First you have to understand it. But once you understand it, you become open to it, and then it connects back to the nefesh. This inyan that I mentioned before, that a person, a human being, everything has to go through the process of understanding, of learning first about it. Even things which are completely human and completely suitable for him, there is no way that he will be comfortable with any other way. He still has to go through a process of learning. This is reflected in an interesting phenomenon, in the fact that a human being is born an infant that's totally incapable of anything. And it goes through a long period of time, relatively speaking, until he first wakes up and begins to become aware of what's going on. You know, he wants to stand up, he wants to talk, he wants to do something. Very different. A human being is born with less self-awareness than any other creature. Lahavdil. There are animals, a horse, within a half hour after it's dropped, begins to jump, walk around. Every other animal, there's no such infancy period that he's totally asleep, incapable of anything. A human being is born that way. Even to nurse is a process of learning.
What is the nurse?
Nurse means to drink, to be nursed by the mother, to be fed. It's also a process. Everything he has to learn. And certainly, to stand up, to talk, to ask, to cry, everything he has to learn. Why is it? The reason for that is that a human being his whole life is directed, is under the control of his brain. He's an intellectual. Everything that he does, even the simplest things, when a person walks, he is aware that he's walking. It's not by intuition or whatever it's called. He's aware what walking means. Everything that a person does is illuminated, is under the control of the brain. It's an intellectual reflection. If he walks, it's because he understands what walking is. Nothing occurs. There's no activity in human being that he is not personally aware of what he is doing. There's no other animal that has this requirement and has this capacity. This is why a human being is called an intellectual being, because he's completely controlled by intellect. Everything. There was a child, I think I mentioned it in the Tuesday class in one of the times. There was a child in Eretz years back that was born. The Gemara says that a child is taught the whole Torah before he is born. And then a malach comes and gives him a snap on his nose, and he forgets it, right before birth. So it says in Kabbalah it's possible that a malach would fail to snap on his nose and he would not forget. And it happened. There was a story relatively recently, this is going back in the 50s, of this child who Nobody knew what's going on. The child was a child like any other child. He came to Cheder. He came to early grades in school. He started learning Bereshis, and he says, Bereshis Bora Elokim Shemayim v'Haaretz. How do you know this? I don't know. What does it mean? I don't know. Did you ever learn it? No. And he actually knew the whole Torah. And there was I personally spoke to someone who told me that he stood next to him one time, at a crossing, at a street crossing. He was waiting for the light, and he stood next to him. So he says, "Ve'ela mitzias shaloi." So he started at that part. That's a Mishnah. "Ve'ela mitzias shaloi." He started rattling off mitzias shaloi. So this sounds like a great thing. It was a tragedy. It was a tragedy because a person to know something without knowing how he got to know it is nothing. He has to know how I got to know it. What was the process? He has to learn it from not knowing, because everything a person has to, if it's human, it has to be learned, not something that he knows by intuition.
What was the tragedy? Was the disadvantage?
Terrible disadvantage, because he couldn't settle down to learn anything. He didn't. There wasn't this coming to this experience of coming from not knowing into knowing.
But he didn't have like the tainug of intellectual competence.
No, it's not only the tainug, the experience. There was no. He did not know what it means to know, because he didn't know what it means not to know. It was a horrible thing. It was a big achmonas. So they took him to the Belzer Rebbe. Belz. There's a Rebbe, that's Leibavitch, there's the Belz. And the Belzer Rebbe gave him a bracha that he should forget. That's the end of the story that I know. What happened afterwards, I don't know. I'm assuming that the bracha was niskayim. But this was a tragedy. And therefore this explains why, even though it ultimately can come to das, and it's ultimately a real thing that we know, and we have simcha, and this is what a yid is, what a human being is, and yet he has to go through the process of learning. And only when he goes through the process of learning is it meaningful, and then the das is meaningful. Okay, we have a few more minutes. We'll go a little further. Before I do you have any questions in what we learned today? I mean, you can ask your questions after your chazar next time, but I'm just saying right now, everything is clear. Reb Yosef, David, Reb David, Reb Meir, Reb Neach,
last class that we had, you said it that you brought up the example of like a person who, like a mentally unbalanced, that you can explain everything to them, and then still it doesn't help. You can explain to them about how the way that they're thinking is flawed. Things are not actually how they perceive them to be, and they'll agree with you and they'll say that everything makes sense. But then when it comes time to actually follow along with everything, like you said, they can't do it because I remember we said the problem, you're trying to explain to them on an intellectual level, but the problem is that they perceive everything intellectually to begin with. That they're cut off from, basically they're cut off everything that we just said now, that a person is able to take it, as far as Ilkni said, that to take the dots, everything that they learn, that it should become, well,
theirs.
They're cut off from, like we said a moment ago, that you can explain it to a person, but their mind is contaminated. They're cut off from the Hakar. They can't.
From the essence.
They can no longer remember. So that's the idea that they don't. That the idea that they're cut off from their essence is the idea that their intellect doesn't have the ability to remember what the neshama already knows, or that their neshama itself
to
is
recognize
cut off from what the neshama knows.
Their intellect, their conscious mind is cut off to their essence. The seichel of a person, like I explained many times, we have to understand, even though we can understand simple things, 2 times 2 equals to 4. And lahavdil, like I pointed out one time, many of you heard it, maybe didn't, that I've seen a doggy that was able to do 2 times 2. Did I tell you the story? No?
I know there's a chicken in Chinatown that can beat everyone with tic-tac-toe.
Tic-tac-toe, right. There was this person, I remember years back, he was a loner. Apparently he had some education, he was an intelligent man, but never, fell down. And his activity was he was walking on Eastern Park with his little white dog. This was his day. And we used to sit down over there on the bench, we used to talk to him. He was not a fool. I mean, how it happened that he became such a hermit, I don't know. But this dog, he taught this dog simple arithmetic. Like he would say, I don't know, not multiplication, but addition, like 3 and 4. And the dog would bark out 7 times. Right? Sounds, wow. Did the dog know the concept of 3 and 4, like a human being knows? 0. There's no such thing as a concept by a dog. There's no concept. Concept is an intellectual property. The dog was able to picture, like he described to him, like he put 3 cups and then he put 4 cups and then he counts them over. 3 and 4 and it's 7. That's not what a human being does. A human being has a concept of 3 and 4. In other words, what I'm saying to you is that the seichel of a person, even the simple seichel, is not an external activity. It is a reflection of his nefesh, because this concept of 3 and 4 exists in the human being. He can relate to the concept. This is why he's able to understand it. Even the simplest things, and certainly all the logic that we explained over here, that he creates the world, Yeshmayayin, and all that, this is all understandable, besides the das, but it's understandable to us also because we are human beings. This is called nefesh asichlis, which is a nefesh, which is a property of a human being exclusively. No animal can remotely relate to that, because it's not based on, animal life is not based on intellect. Human life is based on intellect, like we just now discussed, which draws on his human soul, nefesh asichlis.
I know I asked a similar question, I think, last class, but is it the only way that a person can bring something down to das is if it already exists in its essence anyway. Meaning a person can't really connect to something which is false.
Right.
A false concept could never, but I mean, can we say like there are people that believe that in evolution, there are people who believe that the world created itself, so to speak, the world is billions of years old. Are you saying that the truth is that they don't, I mean, it's hard to imagine that you're going to say to someone, they're going to say, I believe in this, and you're going to say, no, you don't really believe it. You think you believe in that, but the truth is you're not so sure. And they're going to say, no, I'm sure, I know it. For me, this is reality. This is, to them, I mean, it cannot be settled in their mind.
Yes, it can. And here's the point. This is what we said before. There's such thing as being contaminated and detached from one's soul. In other words, what is possible is that one makes a decision that reality is only that which he can understand with his brain. The reality is not related back to a living soul. In other words, he is convinced of it. Absolutely. But he's convinced of it by virtue, by the process of not recognizing that he's alive. His reality is defined by that which he can logically understand. And that's the limit of his reality. And then, yes, and this is what happens. Like you asked, how come he can understand anything? He can't. Because his whole reality is limited to that, and that becomes, it's all external. The whole reality is just a formulation of entities, of interactions, rather than a true, like we say, that the world is created yesh me'ayin. That's exclusively a human concept. And the concept comes from the fact that he's alive. It's not created by logic, it's created by his kind of concept. By him recognizing that there is a real world, he says, oh, yes, me, I. If he does not say that there's a real world, then it's not yes, me, I.
In order for him to be able to hold something which is not true, so to speak, into Das, he has to be disconnected from his own humanity.
That's right.
That he can't, if he really understands like the idea of personhood and what it means, so then it's impossible.
That's right. He ultimately, yes, it's possible. A human being can become devoid of any sense of human qualities. Absolutely. But then he will really act something that is completely not human, like the Nazis. Can you imagine human beings living with that? American soldiers, when they entered the camps, they went crazy. It wasn't their relatives, they went crazy. They just, this is bestial. And these people were living with us. Okay, gentlemen. One side up.